The king knew that if Adama remained unmarried, it would bring disgrace upon their family and jeopardize the future of the kingdom. Once upon a time, in a small village called Amaka, there lived a king. He was a good and kind king, but he had a very big worry. You see, he didn't have any child to be his heir, someone to rule the kingdom after him. Every evening, the king would sit outside his house, thinking about what would happen to his kingdom if he couldn't find a way to have a child. Rumors spread through the village that the king had used magic to become king because he didn't have a rightful claim to the throne. One day, the king decided to talk to his wife, Queen Asa, about his worries. When Queen Asa came out, the king shared his troubles with her. The queen felt sad too because she also wanted to have a child. Then the king decided that they should visit a neighboring village the next morning to seek help from the native doctors there. And early the next day, before the rooster crowed, the king and queen disguised themselves as villagers and set out on their journey. They traveled through forests and crossed streams until they reached the neighboring village of Umuchi, where they hoped to find a solution. After finding the native doctor's hut, with the help of a guard, they waited until nightfall to speak with him. As they approached the hut, a booming voice welcomed them, calling the king by a different name. The queen trembled with fear, but the king nodded in approval. The native doctor told them that they wouldn't have a child of their own, but the gods would bless them with three daughters. They would have to wait for one of their daughters to marry and have a son to become the heir to the throne. Though the king and queen were sad, they accepted the doctor's words as the will of the gods. They returned to their village, dispelling the rumors that they had run away. Months passed, and the queen's belly began to swell with the growing babies. The villagers were excited to see the queen pregnant, but the queen wished for a son. Finally, the day came for the queen to give birth. One by one, three baby girls were born. Though the king had hoped for a son, he accepted the daughters as the gifts from the gods. As the girls grew, the villagers began to accept them. The king and queen raised their daughters with love and care, despite the rumors that still lingered. As the girls grew into young women, suitors began to come from far and wide, seeking their hands in marriage. But the king wanted only the best for his daughters, so he turned away many suitors who were not princes. As the sun rose over the village of Umoka, the king's heart was heavy with worry. His eldest daughter, Princess Adama, had caused him great shame with her eating habits. Despite his scoldings and the restrictions he placed upon her, she continued to overeat, growing fatter and unhappier by the day. The king knew that if Adama remained unmarried, it would bring disgrace upon their family and jeopardize the future of the kingdom. As the days passed, he pondered over a solution to his daughter's plight, determined to find a way to secure her marriage and preserve the honor of their household. One morning, without seeking advice from his advisors, the king made a bold decision. He ordered the town crier to announce to the entire village that he would offer great rewards, lands, cows, and even half of his kingdom to anyone who would marry his daughters. News of the king's generous offer spread quickly, and soon suitors from far and near gathered in the village square, hoping to win the hand of one of the beautiful princesses and claim the king's reward for themselves. However, when the king revealed that only Adama would be given in marriage first, many of the suitors were disappointed. Some even murmured among themselves, questioning the king's decision. As Adama stepped forward, hoping to find a husband among the gathered suitors, she was met with disdain and mockery. The suitors, realizing that they would only be competing for the hand of the eldest princess, began to disperse, cursing the king under their breath. Feeling embarrassed and ashamed, the king bowed his head in sorrow. Some of the princes, accompanied by their fathers, confronted the king, accusing him of insulting them with his offer. In a moment of despair, the king turned to his daughter and expressed his disappointment in her. He spoke of the shame she had brought upon him and the family, lamenting that even his greatest plan had failed to secure her marriage. As the village square emptied and the suitors departed, the king and his family were left alone, facing the harsh reality of Adama's situation. As days went by, Princess Adama's situation seemed to worsen despite her father's efforts to restrict her eating habits and encourage weight loss. She only seemed to gain more weight. The king, feeling helpless and desperate, locked her away in her room, hoping that isolation would somehow help her shed the extra pounds. Adama, feeling trapped and miserable, tried everything she could think of to lose weight. She even resorted to drastic measures, such as starving herself and attempting suicide, but nothing seemed to work, and her despair only deepened. One day, her maid Nkoli suggested seeking help from her mother, who was skilled in preparing mixtures that could aid in weight loss. Desperate for solution, Adama agreed, hoping that this would finally help her slim down and attract suitors. Unfortunately, even after trying the mixture for weeks, Adama saw no improvement. She felt defeated and resigned herself to her fate, accepting that she would never be able to change her appearance. Meanwhile, the king continued to hope for a miracle, believing that one day his daughter would lose weight and find happiness. But as time passed and Adama's condition showed no signs of improvement, his disappointment grew deeper, and he began to question whether he was being punished by the gods for some unknown sin. Despite the king's efforts to keep Adama hidden away from the villagers' prying eyes, rumors and mockery continued to spread. Adama became a source of amusement for the villagers, who would point and laugh at her whenever she was in public. The princess's only solace came during the village annual New Yam festival. Although her father allowed her to leave her room on the condition that she stayed away from the village square, Adama found joy in dancing to the beats of the drums from afar. It was a brief moment of happiness in an otherwise bleak existence. As the first day of the festival came to a close, Adama returned home, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she would soon be forced back into isolation. She did it consistently, making sure that no one sees her, especially people from the village, so that it would not reach the king's ears. Not even her sisters knew about this. Princess Adama ensured that no one else knew her little secret. Although the king had seen her coming back into the palace once and asked her why she left amidst his orders, she explained she was somewhere around the palace walking and jogging to lose weight. Speaking of losing weight, the king had to let her be since it was what he wanted. "Where have you been going since the start of the festival?" her most trusted maid asked her one day while she bumped into her returning from her usual routine, sweating. Princess Adama looked left and right. No one was in sight. She covered her maid's mouth, signaled her to follow her inside her room, then shut the door. Don't let anyone else hear that I have been leaving the palace, so it won't reach the king's ears, she said almost in a panic. Then she smiled shyly, swinging herself from left to right. I can't wait to hear this gist of yours. Is there someone always taking you away from the palace? If there is, it's even a thing of joy, as the kingdom is expecting it, the maid said as she noticed the princess's expression changed and she kept a sad look. It's fine if you don't want to talk about it, my princess. Just don't stay out that late again. You know it's the festive period and the king might come back early from the village square and find you. I don't want to lose my job, she said almost in a whisper. Princess Adama did not say anything for a while. Then she said, I have been far away from the outskirts of the village, dancing and making myself happy, since the gods do not want me to be happy, she said, smiling. The maid had placed her hand on her chin, ready to listen to everything the princess had to say. Oh, I had forgotten you love dancing to the rhythm of the ogene. Let me pretend I'm the drummer, so you can dance right now. Hearing it, the princess became so excited as she started dancing while the maid mimicked the sound of the ogene. The princess swung her waist completely, forgetting about everything that was disturbing her until the maid stopped the beat, making her realize, that was beautiful. I did not know you could mimic the ogene so well, the princess said, breathing heavily, and as she wanted to say something, her father, the king, knocked at the door. Open this door, Adama. There was complete silence as the princess rushed to open the door. The maid stood head down, placing her hands on her back. What is that sound I'm hearing? Instead of concentrating on how to lose weight and take this shame away from me, you are here disturbing the peace of this palace. He scolded Princess Adama, who had just remembered her predicament as tears started dripping from her eyes. The king could not stand to see her cry, so he left, shutting the door resulting in a bang. My princess, please stop crying. You are not bad the way you are. Any man that values you will not hesitate to marry you, her maid said as the king left, placing her hand on the princess's shoulder and trying to talk her out of her worries. What haven't I done to lose weight? Why is my father blaming me as if I'm the cause of all this? And why have the gods refused to listen to my cry, at least for once, and make me slim like my sisters? She said, crying her eyes out while her maid did not have anything else to do but to console her. I believe you will find someone soon, my princess, her maid said. Then the princess suddenly remembered that she had just returned from dancing to the ogene. The king had not noticed what she was wearing, as she was almost dressed like one of the dancers in the land. Thank goodness he did not see what I was wearing. I will really need to be careful next time, she said, pulling out the clothes. The next morning was not any better. It was the second day of the festival. On the second day, the princesses were to appear before the village square to get accustomed to the culture of their land and also see the able men of their community wrestling so that they will have in mind the ones they will get married to. The other princesses had dressed in their best attire and Princess Adama followed suit. She knew about the custom and had to dress up in order to go with the king to the village square. But when she was done and came outside to tell the king, he said something that broke her into 1,000 pieces. You will only make the people mock me at the village square, and there might be no festival today because of you. Can't you see how beautiful your sisters look? It is because of you they will not be able to pick a suitor today. Just go inside and do something about yourself, he said with rage. The queen wanted to interfere but could not say anything as the king had the final say. Nothing could change his mind. Princess Adama ran to her room, tears streaming down her face. She tore off every adornment she had worn, collapsed to the floor, and blamed the gods for her misfortune. Princess Adama heart ached as she sat alone in her room, the sound of laughter and music from the festival echoing in the distance. Tears streamed down her face as she felt the weight of her father's disappointment pressing down on her. In a moment of desperation, Adama decided to sneak out of the palace and attend the festival in secret. She reasoned that if she stayed hidden, no one would notice her presence. With determination in her heart, she hastily dressed and slipped out through a hidden passage. As she danced joyously to the rhythm of the ogene, Adama lost herself in the music, her cares melting away. But unknown to her, she danced closer and closer to the village square, where the festival was in full swing. Suddenly, the king's angry voice cut through the air, shattering Adama's moment of bliss. She froze in place, realizing she had disobeyed her father's orders once again. Shame washed over her as the villagers' mocking laughter filled the air. Unable to bear the humiliation, the king ordered Adama to be taken away and locked up for disobedience. Her heart sank as she was led away, her mother and sisters looking on with pity. Meanwhile, the king's authority was being questioned by the villagers, who demanded an heir to the throne. Feeling the weight of their discontent, the king knew that he had to regain their support or risk losing his rule. With a heavy heart, the king reluctantly dismissed the festival, leaving the villagers grumbling and discontent. Alone in his palace, he pondered on his next move, knowing that his actions had only deepened the rifts between him and his people. As for Adama, she spent the days in her room, consumed by sorrow and regret. She longed for a way to redeem herself in her father's eyes and prove that she was worthy of love and acceptance. The king, on getting home, was so upset. He threw down his crown, screaming at everyone in his sight. Who does she think she is to flaunt my orders without thinking twice? He screamed to himself, throwing down everything on his way before going to his room. The princess was locked up again, with no food or water for 2 days, which did her no good, as nothing changed. Not even a little bit of fat was reduced. She, on the other hand, had to starve herself, hoping it would help her and take away all the shame, at least for once. No member of the royal household was permitted to see her throughout the time she was locked up in her room. Everything she needed was just provided, and the king gave an order that anyone caught visiting the princess or even taking food to her would be locked up in the dark room until the end of the festival, which was supposed to last for 4 days. No one dared to violate the rules, not even the king's beloved wife. She knew that the king was not in the best mood and would not fail to punish her if she were guilty. It was as if the king was obsessed with the throne and would do anything to stay as king, even if it meant jeopardizing the happiness of his daughter. He had to journey alone this time to the neighboring village to inquire what the problem was and why his daughter had not been able to lose weight. He did it the same way he did the first time, by disguising himself and leaving the village, taking days to get to the neighboring village. He arrived late at night and was to go back just in time for the last day of the festival, which was the next day. He would do anything to get there in time before the celebration began. Getting there, he met the native doctor, who was just about to leave to get some leaves from the forest. King Ejiofor, you have come to inquire about the princess. I would advise you to start going. Treat her well, and you will get whatever you desire. The gods are wise, and things have started happening already. The native doctor said to the king as he left without turning back, making the king wonder. Did I journey day and night just to listen to that? He asked himself. Confused, he was expecting an instant solution to his problem. What does treating the princess well have to do with her losing weight? I'm her father, and I know what's best for her, he said as he stood for a minute, thinking about how to journey back home. He knew that even if he had to hurry back home, he would be late for the festival, which was just the next day. He did not have a choice as the festival was to decide his fate. If he was going to continue as a king or step down for someone else because a prince was to be introduced to the people as the heir apparent to the throne and blessed by the gods on the last day of the festival. But there he was with no one to marry his daughter, not even a drunkard. He would have just given her out to secure the throne. He just had to hurry back home and accept whatever the gods had in store for him, even if it meant giving out the throne to someone else. For the last time, he bowed his head and cried, then continued his journey back home. Meanwhile, the last day of the festival came, and the king was nowhere to be found. The queen, on the other hand, lied that the king was sick and would not want anyone close to him. The people accepted and started the festival without him, while the queen prayed for the king to at least come back and accept his fate. Maybe we were not meant to continue the royal lineage, she said, burying her face in her palms to cry, as the princess rushed to console her. Then they all dressed up and left for the festival with teary eyes. The queen instructed the guards not to let anyone into the palace so they would not notice the king is missing. She knew he would come back. Princess Adama was also free with a condition that she doesn't come anywhere close to the village square ever again. So the queen said. When they all had left, Princess Adama sneaked out using her curtain to climb down from the palace and ran to her usual spot. She wanted to enjoy just one more time of dancing before her fate is finally decided by the gods. She could not miss it if anything. When she went to her usual spot dancing to the beat of the drums as usual, she heard a footstep, got frightened that someone had seen her, and started running away. Then a young man emerged from the bush. He was so handsome that even his eyes were like stars, built like a warrior. Don't stop dancing, please, he told her while she paused to find out who it was. My name is Amadi. I am from the neighboring village. I always come here to sing whenever my heart is troubled, and all my pains will go away, he said, smiling. I'm Princess Adama, the unwanted princess of this kingdom. Although this is the first time I'm seeing you here, I came here to dance away my sorrows. Princess Adama introduced herself. Who does not know the fat, ugly princess? He had thought silently. But she is beautiful and danced so well, he said within him. He heard the princess was ugly, that was why he did not bother coming out as a suitor. But the princess he saw was different from the one he heard about, as she was so beautiful. Then he stared at the princess for a while and said, I love the way you dance, my princess. Will you do me the favor of dancing again? The way you swing your waist is just like the goddess herself is dancing. The princess could not contain her joy. At least somebody appreciated the way she danced. Since he was her only audience, there was nowhere she could say no to him. She started dancing as he played his flute, matching the beat of the ogene. The princess got carried away once again. Princess Adama continued dancing, and Amadi allowed her to dance as her expression showed she was happy. Amadi stopped playing the flute and simply stood there, admiring the way the princess moved perfectly with the drum's beat. He was mesmerized. He had never seen a maiden dance like she did. The fact that she could dance so well, despite her body size, was captivating to watch. He couldn't take his eyes off her. She stopped dancing when she noticed he was entranced by her movements. He was still staring at her when she snapped her fingers, causing him to startle and then regain consciousness. "My princess, you dance beautifully," he said, his face beaming with a smile as she also smiled shyly. No one had complimented me that way before. Everyone else just saw her as a fat, shapeless creature. It was time to leave as the festival was coming to an end, and she needed to rush home before everyone else. She noticed the drum beat slowing down, signaling that everyone would soon depart. "Thank you so much for making me happy. I need to go home now," she said. Amadi's expression turned sad. He was enjoying her company, unaware of her restrictions. Before he could comprehend it all, the princess had vanished, hurrying home to avoid further restriction on the last day. She followed the familiar bush track, running as fast as her legs could carry her, finally arriving at the palace. The guards were too preoccupied to notice as she slipped in, removing her shoes and tiptoeing to avoid making any noise. Finally in her room, she climbed onto her bed, letting out a sigh of relief and smiling very well as she reminisced about the kind of words the young man had spoken to her. It had been declared in the village square that a new king would be installed in a week's time. The king attended the festival, and as the people saw him walking as if he were perfectly fine, they questioned him. "My king, you don't look sick," one of the villagers said. He turned to look at his wife, who signaled that she had lied on his behalf. He tried to cover up by saying, "Oh, praise the gods." As the ogene played, I stood up and danced to it, and I felt instant healing. "I had to come here and celebrate with you." Of course, he knew nobody believed the lie, but as he was still their king, there was nothing they could do about it. Then the kingmaker interrupted, saying, "Igwe, it's good that you are here. We were discussing the future of this kingdom. Since your wife cannot produce an heir and nobody wants to marry the princess, we would like you to step down in a week's time, and the staff of royalty will be passed on to another family." This news hit the king like a shock. Although he anticipated it, he strongly believed in the words of the native doctor that the gods were in control of everything. "He lied to me," the king murmured, saying nothing to his people as he silently went and sat on his throne, contemplating how to hand over the kingship, a legacy passed down from his ancestors to his lineage. He was completely disappointed by how everything had turned out. Returning to the ongoing festival, he watched the maidens dancing and the young men engaging in a sword fight. As the festival concluded, the king addressed his people, although with a heavy heart. The queen could see tears welling up in his eyes, and how hard he was trying to control them. He was a king and was never expected to cry. Then they all dispersed to their various houses, with the king going back to the palace with his family. Straight to his room, he ordered the gate to be locked, and no one was allowed to visit him or make any complaints. After all, he was no longer going to be their king. The palace doors were closed the first day, making life more difficult for the princess as she could not go back to see Amadi. She had been having several dreams about him that she could not disclose to anybody, not even her trusted maid. She had to keep everything to herself, fantasizing about him and imagining a world with him free from her troubles. Everyone in the palace had to completely ignore one another, thinking about possible ways to stop the problems they were facing. Princess Adama was lost in her own world, and the thought of not seeing Amadi had completely destabilized her. She had to find a way to see him again. She didn't care about the king's orders at that time. The fact that he didn't care about her and saw her as the cause of his problems didn't stop her. It was another day of silence in the royal house. Princess Adama didn't care about anything other than Amadi. She wondered if he still came to their usual spot in search of her. She didn't understand if he had any other feelings for her beside his love for the way she danced. The only way she could find out was by meeting him face to face, and she needed to make that happen. The fact that her father was no longer going to be the king didn't bother her anymore, as long as she could still visit Amadi, who would play the flute for her to dance. She wished she wasn't even the first daughter. She was tired of hiding from the whole village when she didn't create herself that way. Although disobeying the king's orders led to serious punishment, she was sad about the ban imposed by the king when it was time to go and see her love. She knew what to do about the whole situation because she kept having dreams about him calling out to her. With a racing heart, she felt his presence in her thoughts, the hope that he too longed for her. What if I don't find him there waiting for me? I don't even know the village he is from, she whispered to herself. The uncertainty gnawed at her, urging her to seek him out. I just need to find him somewhere, and somehow, I'm just losing it, she declared, her voice echoing in the quiet room. Standing up, she took a deep breath, her resolve firm as she slowly stepped out of her chamber. With a determined look on her face, she was set on a mission to locate him, to solve the mystery that connected their hearts. Princess Adama raced out of the gate the moment it was opened after pleading with the guard to be rewarded handsomely if he allowed her to go out. Despite the king's warning, the guard took a risk by opening the gate. It was a day without dancing for the princess, and she was unhappy unless she saw Amadi. Stopping on the road, she looked left and right to ensure no one was following her. Even if Amadi agrees to marry me, will my father approve? She asked, knowing the king preferred a prince for his daughter, making it challenging to convince him otherwise. Perhaps the rule would not apply in her case since the king was desperate at the moment. She knew he would be willing to accept any suitor as long as he retained his throne. Unfortunately, upon arrival, she couldn't find Amadi, crushing her hopes. Was he not thinking about me as I thought of him? She questioned, almost in tears, wondering if the gods were playing tricks on her. Disheartened, she sat there, hoping Amadi would show up and express his feelings. She didn't care about the consequences of her absence from the palace, thinking what could be worse than what he has already done. There was nothing new he could do to her at that point. Sitting there, she had an idea to lift her spirits since Amadi didn't show up. Why don't I just dance and make myself happy as I usually do? She thought aloud. It was a great idea. Princess Adama started dancing to the invisible beats of the drum, imagining the drums being played. She danced alone, lost in her own world, feeling good as she moved to the rhythm. Closing her eyes, she left the music in her mind guide her movements, picturing her lover and finding happiness in the dance. As she continued, she heard the flute playing, but she was so engrossed in her own dance that she initially ignored it, thinking it was part of her imagination. It was not until the sound drew closer that she stopped and turned, only to find Amadi playing the flute. Overwhelmed, she rushed to hug him, unsure of her actions in the moment. She then hesitated, realizing the implications of her actions as a princess and fearing rejection. With a serious expression, she asked him, "What are you doing here?" Amadi, initially silent, smiled, leaving her wondering if he was at a loss for words. Despite her heart racing like she had just finished running, she managed a faint smile, hoping he would speak. When he finally expressed his admiration for her dancing and asked her to dance again, her heart skipped a beat. "I came here to see you," he spilled. Blushing and unable to meet his gaze directly, she shyly inquired, "See me? Why?" Her emotion in a whirlwind, she waited for his response, not wanting to ruin the moment they shared. "Can you dance for me one more time?" he asked, and she knew she didn't have a choice at that moment because she was willing to do anything for Amadi, even if she had not expressed it to him directly. In this kingdom, a man proposes first, she thought deeply. Amadi, not a prince, expressed his concerns about seeking her hand in marriage and his desire for her to dance for him every day. This was precisely what the princess longed for. She had contemplated asking her father, the king, to open the gates, believing all their problems would vanish with a suitor. However, she pondered whether her father would accept a poor man like Amadi, whom she viewed as just a farmer from the neighboring community, lacking princely status. "I will come with my people in the next 2 market days to see the king and ask for your hand in marriage," Amadi declared confidently. Despite his appearance indicating poverty, the princess questioned if the king would approve. She noticed the king's disregard for suitors' backgrounds, as he was more concerned with maintaining his throne. Excited by the news, she planned to disclose everything to the king as soon as possible. "After all, he will retain his throne while I get married to the one I love," she said. Unknown to her, the gods had different plans in store, a revelation she would uncover in due time. As Amadi finished speaking, he escorted her halfway to the palace along the bush track to avoid villagers seeing them. Since he was not prepared to marry her at the moment, she planned with a guard to open the gate upon her return, and as planned, he did so. Rushing back to her room, she then opened the door and went straight to bed. Princess Adama thought about how she would tell her father that someone was finally ready to marry her, regardless of the body size. With a smile on her face and deep in thought, she fell fast asleep. The princess could no longer keep everything to herself. When she got up, she rushed to see her father in his chambers. Although the king had asked not to be disturbed, she felt the news would uplift his spirit. She had to tell him so they could start making preparations. If Amadi arrived, she asked herself, what if he does not come back? That was just a silly thought trying to talk her out of her happiness. She ignored it and knocked at the father's chamber. "Come in," he said, as she bowed her head before the king, who was already upset at the sight of her. He did not say anything. She then said, "Someone is coming for my hand in marriage, father." The king looked confused as he glanced at her from head to toe. He could not believe it and remained silent, trying to understand the situation. Then he suddenly asked, "Is he a prince?" "No, he's not a prince," Princess Adama responded. She could not believe her ears. Why would the king be asking that kind of question, especially when she knew he was desperate and even mentioned giving her away to a drunkard? What is the king even planning? He didn't even say anything more to her. He simply used his hands to dismiss her as she left for her room, trying to wrap her head around everything that was happening and the king's sudden change of mind. She could tell that something was amiss, but she just didn't know what. Who was she to question the king? A man who had once thrown his own wife into a cage for 2 days just for disobeying him. Everyone was scared of him. So she had to do her best to convince him, or else she wouldn't be able to marry Amadi, her beloved. What was so special about marrying a prince anyway? It was like marrying just anyone else. She had her plans to run away with him if the king took too long to accept everything. After all, he was the only one who truly appreciated and loved her. She wasn't going to miss the opportunity because no one else would want her. The time was drawing near for the king to be dethroned, yet he didn't seem bothered in the slightest way. It seemed like he had accepted his fate. But the great lion doesn't give up easily. It was unlike him. Could he be planning something? No one knew, not even his wife, the queen. She was just there. The king didn't bother to tell her anything. She was merely the queen. Princess Adama, on the other hand, continued to sneak off to see her lover, who would play the flute for her to dance, and together they would dream of forever. Until one fateful day, when she returned to find the king at the gate, she wondered how he got there. "Where have you been?" he asked. "I have heard about the young man you have been going to meet." She glanced at the palace, and the guard who was always opening the gate for her was lying on the ground face down. Someone might have related everything to the king. "You are the cause of everything going on in this kingdom. And even with it all, you could not attract a prince but a farmer who will have nothing to offer to this kingdom," he yelled, hitting his staff on the floor. "Take the princess and lock her up in the cage alongside this guard," he ordered. It was just so confusing, and it seemed the king had gone mad because he obviously did not know what he was doing. Princess Adama was locked up for 2 more days. Amadi kept coming to the place to find her in their usual spot, but he did not find her there. He would come and sit for hours, playing the flutes with the hope that she would show up, but it did not happen. Although the sound from the flute still played in her ears whenever she fell asleep. She could hear him call Adama in a faint voice, but when she wakes up, she will realize she is in a cage guarded by guards. The king also did not leave his room or talk to anyone. He withdrew himself from everything, speaking to himself that at times his wife will run away once she enters his court. The palace was extremely silent, and days were counting for him to finally vacate the throne for another family. That could have been the reason he was acting like someone who had lost his senses. He knew he would achieve nothing but locking his daughter up for no reason. Was it because she could not attract a prince? Or was it due to pure hatred he had for her? This time, the king had gone to see her in the cage, where he locked her, keeping a straight face. But what he saw shocked him. For the first time, the princess had reduced a bit. He had to look again, although did not cause a scene, because the princess herself did not know anything. Though the weight loss was not really obvious, the king went his way without saying anything to anyone. He did not even allow anyone close to the princess. She was on her own in the cage. He felt letting anyone know would distract the process. He wanted to leave her and come back to see more improvement. In that way, she would get married to a prince and leave the farmer she had finally fallen in love with. To him, such a man does not deserve his daughter. It was a good sign that she was losing a bit of weight. If she loses it completely, a better man will find her, a rich prince from whom he will gain fortunes while he retains his position as the king. The princess, on the other hand, could not stop thinking about Amadi. She would rather die than agree to marry any prince who would not value her. The king came back to see how the princess had reduced again, and to his surprise, she was fatter than before. It was the gods playing tricks on him and his selfishness. When he looked at her, he was more disappointed. He asked the guards to release her. It was just 2 days to his dethronement, and she knew there was nothing else he could do as he valued his throne. He ordered, "Open the gate." When the gate was opened, he said to the weak princess, "I have accepted your marriage to the farmer. Go and tell him to bring his people in 2 days, and I will bless your marriage." The princess did not say anything to him. She fell face down due to tiredness. The guards had to rush to her. and lay her in her room on the bed. The king did not care in the slightest. He was just concerned about his kingdom. To him, even if she does not marry a prince, he has two pretty daughters who will make him proud. All he needed to do was marry her off. She was useless to him. He could not wait for the young man to come with his people and take her away so that he can organize a festival where his other two daughters will pick a rich prince for themselves. He smiled as he thought about it. It was still a win for him. As the sun rose on the kingdom, there was an air of excitement. Princess Adama's heart fluttered with anticipation as she prepared for her wedding day. She couldn't believe that the day she had dreamed of was finally here. In a small village not far from the palace, Amadi stood nervously with his family and friends, dressed in his finest attire. He was filled with joy and anticipation, knowing that soon he would be marrying the woman he loved more than anything in the world. But there was a secret that Amadi had kept hidden from everyone, even Princess Adama. He was not just a humble farmer, he was a prince from a distant kingdom who had disguised himself to find true love. He had traveled far and wide, searching for a princess who would love him for who he was, not for his royal title. As the villagers gathered in the courtyard of the palace, the atmosphere was filled with excitement and joy. The king stood at the front, a proud smile on his face as he waited for the daughter to make her grand entrance. Finally, the moment arrived. The palace doors swung open and Princess Adama stepped out, her beauty shining like a beacon in the sunlight. She wore a gown of shimmering white, her hair adorned with flowers and jewelries. Amadi's heart skipped a beat as he caught sight of his bride. She was more beautiful than he had ever imagined, and in that moment, he knew that he had found his true love. The ceremony was simple but filled with love and happiness. The king blessed the union of Princess Adama and Amadi, wishing them a lifetime of joy and prosperity. As they exchanged vows and rings, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the newlyweds. It was a moment of pure magic, a moment they would cherish forever. After the ceremony, the villagers gathered for a grand feast to celebrate the newlyweds. There was music and dancing, laughter and joy as everyone came together to share in the happiness of the happy couple. As Princess Adama and Amadi danced beneath the stars, surrounded by their loved ones, they knew that they were truly blessed. They had found each other against all odds, and nothing could ever tear them apart. And so, as the night drew to a close and the stars twinkled overhead, Princess Adama and Amadi began their journey together as husband and wife. After their magical wedding, Princess Adama and Amadi, who was secretly a prince, began their life together as husband and wife. They laughed, they danced, and they cherished each other's company. But there was a secret weighing heavily on Amadi's heart. One evening, as they sat in their garden, Amadi took a deep breath and revealed his true identity to Adama. "My love," he began, "I am not just a humble farmer. I am actually a prince from a distant kingdom. I disguised myself to find true love, and I found it in you." Princess Adama's eyes widened in shock and surprise. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "A prince?" she exclaimed. "But why did you keep this secret away from me?" Amadi took her hands in his and explained, "I was afraid that if you knew the truth, you would only love me for my title, not for who I am as a person. But now that we are married, I want to be honest with you, my love." Princess Adama was speechless. She felt a mix of emotions, surprise, disbelief, but most of all, overwhelming love for her husband. "I love you, Amadi," she whispered, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. Your title doesn't matter to me. It's your heart that I fell in love with. With their love stronger than ever, Princess Adama and Prince Amadi decided to return to Adama's kingdom to reveal the truth to her father, the king. They knew it would be a difficult conversation, but they were determined to face it together. When they arrived at the palace, they were met with shock and disbelief from the king and the villagers. But Princess Adama stood tall and proud, holding her husband's hand tightly. "Father," she began, her voice steady, "I have something important to tell you. Amadi is not just a farmer. He is a prince from a distant kingdom." The king's eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment he was speechless. Then he bowed his head in shame. "I am sorry, my daughter," he said softly. "I should have treated you better, regardless of your suitor's status. Can you ever forgive me?" Princess Adama's heart swelled with love and forgiveness for her father. "Of course, father," she replied, tears of joy in her eyes. "All that matters is that we are all together now as family." The villagers who had once shunned Princess Adama now begged for her forgiveness too. They realized their mistakes and vowed to treat her with the respect and kindness she deserved. As the days passed, the kingdom rejoiced in the newfound happiness of Princess Adama and Prince Amadi. The villagers even approached the king, telling him that he could continue to be their king as long as he ruled with fairness and compassion. Months went by, and Princess Adama discovered that she was pregnant. The news filled her and Prince Amadi with overwhelming joy. They eagerly awaited the arrival of their little one, knowing that their love would only grow stronger with the addition of a child. Finally, the day arrived as Adama gave birth to a handsome baby boy. When the baby boy was born, the kingdom rejoiced. Adama, Amadi, and their baby lived happily ever after, surrounded by love and happiness. And that is the end of the story, where love and forgiveness bring joy to everyone's heart. The most important lesson in this story is that we learn a very important lesson about love. It shows us that love is very powerful and can help us overcome any challenges or differences we face. Princess Adama and her husband Amadi faced many obstacles because they loved each other. Adama's father, the king, didn't want her to marry Amadi because he wasn't a prince. But Adama was brave and followed her heart, showing us that it's important to stand up for what we believe in, even if others don't agree. Amadi also taught us about accepting others for who they are. Even though he was a prince, he didn't care about titles. He loved Adama for who she was, not what she had. And the story also reminds us that parents should always love and support their children. Adama's father learned this lesson too late, but he apologized to her and realized that his love for her was more important than anything else. In the end, love conquers all the problems, bringing happiness to everyone. This teaches us that love is the most important thing in the world, and it can make everything better. So always remember to love others and be true to yourself. And with that, my dear friends, our story comes to a close. But remember, the magic of storytelling lives on, waiting to whisk us away on new adventures, where the wonders of imagination know no bounds. Goodbye for now, and may your dreams be filled with joy, wonder, and endless possibility. Thank you so much for watching. Please kindly comment, share, like, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting stories.